The skies above Helios Prime burned. 5,000 Vraxian warships had descended upon the last Allied coalition outpost in the Vega sector without warning. Their sleek, obsidian hulls absorbed what little sunlight reached them, making them appear as nothing more than void-carved shadows against the stars. The Coalition Defense Fleet, a mere 300 vessels, had formed a desperate perimeter around the colony's orbital platforms. Commander Leora Voss stood rigid on the bridge of the Defiant Resolution, her copper eyes fixed on the tactical display. The holographic projection showed their inevitable demise in cold mathematical certainty. Survival probability 0.04%. Commander, Lieutenant Ekran's voice cracked slightly, betraying the Centaurian's usual stoic demeanor. The civilian evacuation is only at 30%. We need more time. Leora's jaw tightened. 7 million colonists remained planetside. Then we'll give them time, Lieutenant. Admiral Krell of the Vraxian Dominion watched with detached amusement from his flagship, the Indomitable Conquest. The humans and their alien allies had resisted Vraxian expansion for nearly 2 decades, but today would mark their final defeat. The Coalition fleet is adjusting formation, reported his second-in-command, Subcommander Dravex. They appear to be sacrificing themselves to cover evacuation efforts. Krell's lipless mouth stretched into what passed for a smile among his species. Predictable sentimentality. Target their command vessel and prepare the assault barges. I want this colony secured by rotation's end. The first volley of quantum torpedoes tore through Coalition shields like paper. 3 destroyers erupted into flames instantly. On the Defiant Resolution, Leora braced against her command station as the deck lurched violently beneath her. "Direct hit on deck 7 through 11, shouted Tactical Officer Malachi. "Shield generators failing." "Reroute emergency power," Leora ordered. "And broadcast on all Coalition frequencies. Execute Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega." The crew's expressions darkened. It was a last resort tactic, one that would sacrifice the fleet to buy the evacuees maximum time. As Coalition ships began deliberate suicide runs against the Vraxian fleet's perimeter, Leora activated her personal recorder. "Final log, Commander. Voss. We stand against annihilation today without hope of victory. But we stand nonetheless. I only regret," the lieutenant interrupted, voice suddenly urgent. "Commander, unknown signature detected at system edge." The tactical display flickered, then showed a massive spatial distortion forming at the outer reaches of the system. Unlike anything their sensors had ever registered before, Admiral Krell noticed it too. "What is that disturbance? Report!" His science officer worked frantically. "Energy readings off the scale, Admiral. It appears to be... It's impossible." The fabric of space itself seemed to tear open, reality folding back upon itself. Through this wound in space-time emerged a vessel of such impossible scale and design that both Coalition and Vraxian crews alike found themselves momentarily stunned into silence. Its hull was midnight blue with silver accents that seemed to shimmer between states of matter. Nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern, its silhouette resembled no known ship design from any civilization. Ancient glyphs pulsed with inner light along its flanks. Coalition communication channels erupted in chaos. "Is that one of ours? It can't be. Nothing that size exists in our registry." "Look at those markings. They're human in origin." Leora's eyes widened as she recognized the impossible vessel. "The Prometheus Ascendant," she whispered. "The legendary ship that had vanished with all hands during humanity's first faster-than-light test 70 years ago, the ship that couldn't possibly exist." Admiral Krell's compound eyes narrowed as he studied the vessel that had materialized from the spatial tear. "The Prometheus Ascendant?" Dravex's voice held uncharacteristic uncertainty. "The human experimental vessel that disappeared decades ago?" "A Coalition trick," Krell hissed. "Some new weapon disguised as their own mythology. Target that vessel with all forward batteries and fire." 1,000 Vraxian warships broke formation, reorienting to face the newcomer. Cascades of destructive energy, plasma bolts, particle beams, and graviton warheads converged on the Prometheus Ascendant with enough combined firepower to shatter a small moon. Every impact simply dissolved. The weapon's fire didn't bounce off shields or even explode against hull plating. Rather, the energy was absorbed into the strange, rippling surface of the vessel, causing the silver patterns to briefly flare brighter before settling back to their rhythmic pulsing. On the bridge of the Defiant Resolution, Leora and her crew watched in stunned silence. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Ekron announced. "It's human frequency, but using encryption protocols that haven't been in service for over 6 decades. "Put it through," Leora ordered, her throat suddenly dry. A voice, deep and distorted as if speaking through time itself, filled the bridge. "Coalition vessels, this is Captain Rowan Kiahi of the Earth vessel Prometheus Ascendant. We apologize for our delayed return. Please distance yourselves from the Vraxian fleet. Their technology is known to us." Captain Kiahi, the legendary test pilot who had vanished along with humanity's most ambitious experimental ship during the dawn of interstellar travel. A figure from the history archives, speaking as if he'd never left. "This can't be real," Malachi whispered. Across the void, Admiral Krell was reaching the same conclusion. "All vessels, concentrate fire. I want that aberration eliminated." The Vraxian fleet adjusted tactics, coordinating their attack with devastating precision. Yet the result remained the same. The Prometheus absorbed every assault without visible damage. Then, the impossible ship moved. Despite its enormous size, it accelerated with impossible grace, leaving a trail of distorted space-time in its wake. As it approached the Vraxian formation, sections of its hull began to reconfigure, components shifting and flowing like liquid metal. "Are those weapon systems?" Leora murmured. The answer came seconds later. The Prometheus Ascendant released not energy weapons or missiles, but what appeared to be thousands of microscopic points of light that spread outward in an expanding sphere. Wherever these motes touched Vraxian ships, systems failed catastrophically. Weapons went offline, engines died, life support faltered. One by one, the mighty Vraxian vessels drifted powerless, like insects caught in invisible amber. "Nanite technology," Lieutenant Ekron breathed, awe evident in his voice. "But centuries, beyond anything in known space." On his paralyzed flagship, Admiral Krell raged impotently as his displays winked out one by one. "What manner of sorcery is this? No human technology could—" "Admiral," interrupted his science officer, voice trembling. "According to the few sensors still functioning, that vessel's hull composition contains elements not found on our periodic table. And the energy readings? They don't conform to known physics." The Prometheus Ascendant moved methodically through the Vraxian fleet, disabling ship after ship without destroying them. Not a single life had been taken, yet the mightiest armada in the quadrant now drifted helpless. Back on the Defiant Resolution, another transmission came through. "Coalition Command, we request a direct conference with your leadership. We have much to discuss. The flow of time where we've been differs significantly from your experience. For us, it has been many centuries since our departure." Leora found her voice at last. "This is Commander Leora Voss of the Defiant Resolution. Captain Kiahi, how is this possible? Where have you been?" The response, when it came, sent chills down her spine. "Beyond, Commander. We've been beyond, and we've brought back knowledge that will change everything. The Vraxian threat is temporary. There are far greater concerns approaching from the dark between galaxies. We returned because humanity will be needed." As the disabled Vraxian ships drifted, the Prometheus Ascendant opened another spatial tear, smaller this time, and from it emerged dozens of sleek vessels of similar but smaller design. "Our escort fleet," explained Captain Kiahi. "The first wave of what's to come." Humanity has established itself elsewhere, and now we've returned home. The tide hadn't just turned. The entire war had suddenly become obsolete. 2 days after the impossible rescue at Helios Prime, the Coalition High Command gathered in emergency session aboard the station Concordia. Representatives from 27 species sat in stunned silence as they watched footage of the Prometheus Ascendant effortlessly neutralizing the Vraxian armada. Admiral Nisera Valorin, the highest-ranking human in the Coalition, stood before the assembly with her hands clasped behind her back. At 78 years old, she was one of the few remaining officers who had been alive when the Prometheus first disappeared. "The vessel has established orbit around Jupiter in our home system," she reported. "Captain Kiahi has requested this. Meeting take place aboard his ship." General Dex of the Arcturian Defense Force snorted derisively. "And we're to simply trust this phantom from the past? A human vessel that returns with technology that violates fundamental laws of physics?" "I knew Rowan Kiahi," Admiral Valorin replied quietly. "He was my instructor at the Academy. If it truly is him—" "It can't possibly be the same man," interrupted Counselor Javi of the Rigelian Compact. "The Prometheus disappeared 70 years ago." Commander Leora Voss, hastily recalled from Helios Prime, cleared her throat. "The captain addressed that, Counselor. He claims they experienced temporal displacement. For the crew, many centuries have passed. The council chambers erupted in overlapping arguments, until Chancellor Morvain, the elderly Aldebaran who headed the coalition, raised his gnarled hand for silence. "What of the Vraxian fleet?" he asked. "Still disabled but life support functional," Leora reported. "The Prometheus deployed smaller craft to provide emergency power. They're treating it as a capture, not a slaughter." Chancellor Morvain nodded thoughtfully. "Then we shall meet with this Captain Kiahi. A delegation of 5. Myself, Admiral Valorin, Commander Voss, who witnessed the event, General Dex representing our military concerns, and Ambassador Zari for diplomatic protocol." 4 hours later, the delegation's shuttle approached the Prometheus Ascendant in Jupiter orbit. Up close, the vessel's true scale became apparent, dwarfing even the largest coalition dreadnoughts. The strange material of its hull seemed to breathe, microscopic patterns flowing like currents beneath the surface. They docked in a bay that reconfigured itself to accommodate their shuttle, the walls flowing like liquid metal to create a perfect seal. "Adaptive nanomaterials," General Dex muttered, despite himself impressed. "We've theorized such technology, but implementation at this scale should be impossible." The delegation was greeted not by an honor guard, but by a single figure, a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark skin and silver-flecked black hair. He wore a simple blue-gray uniform without insignia. "Admiral Valorin," the man said, a smile warming his features. "You've hardly aged a day." Nisera Valorin stared in disbelief. "Rowan? But how—" "Time dilation is only the beginning of what we experienced," Captain Kiahi replied. "Please follow me, there's much to explain." They walked through corridors where the boundaries between technology and architecture blurred. Surfaces responded to their presence, illuminating pathways and adjusting ambient conditions for each species' comfort. Occasionally, they glimpsed other crew members, all human, all dressed in similar, understated uniforms. "Where are the rest of your people?" Ambassador Zari inquired. "A vessel this size would require thousands to operate." Kiahi's expression grew complicated. "The Prometheus largely operates itself now. We've evolved beyond traditional crewing requirements." They entered what appeared to be a conference room, though the walls displayed a perfect real-time view of space around them, as if they were suspended among the stars themselves. Once seated, Captain Kiahi addressed them directly. "The test flight that took the Prometheus from Earth 70 years ago encountered a phenomenon we weren't prepared for. A fold in space-time that catapulted Us not just across space, but across dimensional boundaries. He gestured, and a holographic display materialized, showing a complex model of intersecting planes of existence. We found ourselves in what you might call a parallel continuum, one where time flows differently and where humanity had already established itself millennia ago. To the humans there, we were the lost ancestors, suddenly returned from prehistory. You expect us to believe there's some parallel universe where humans are an advanced civilization? General Dex asked skeptically. Not just advanced, Kiahi corrected. Transcendent. They helped us understand the multi-dimensional nature of reality, taught us technologies based on principles your science hasn't yet discovered. And they warned us about threats approaching. This dimension. Threats the Vraxians unwittingly serve as harbingers for. Leora leaned forward. What threats? Captain Kiahi's expression darkened. Entities that exist between realities. They consume civilizations, feeding on conscious thought itself. The Vraxians' aggressive expansion has been subtly influenced by these entities for generations, preparation for something far worse. Chancellor Morvaine's aged features showed deep concern. And you've returned to warn us? To help you prepare, Kiahi corrected, and to offer an alliance with the transcended humanity of the parallel continuum. The Prometheus is just the first emissary. Others will follow. This is... Admiral Valoran shook her head in amazement. Rowan, if what you're saying is true, you're offering us technology that would completely transform our civilization overnight. Not overnight, Kiahi said firmly. Gradually, responsibly. We've seen worlds tear themselves apart by advancing too quickly. But yes, we offer a path forward, beginning with ending the Vraxian conflict peacefully. General Dex scoffed. The Vraxians don't negotiate. They will, Kiahi said with quiet confidence, when they understand what's coming. The negotiations with the Vraxian Dominion took place aboard the Prometheus Ascendant, now positioned in neutral territory between Coalition and Vraxian space. Admiral Krell, his pride visibly wounded, sat across from Chancellor Morvaine at a table that seemed to hover unsupported in the center of a spherical chamber. Captain Kiahi stood nearby, silently observing as Ambassador Zari outlined terms for the cessation of hostilities. Outside the viewports, both Coalition and Vraxian fleets maintained respectful distances, though the Prometheus's escort ships, now numbering over 50 vessels of various sizes, formed a loose perimeter around the proceedings. These terms are unacceptable, Krell hissed, compound eyes narrowing to slits. You demand we relinquish territories rightfully conquered. Territories where billions were slaughtered, Zari countered evenly, and submit to oversight from this coalition of weaklings. Captain Kiahi stepped forward then, his movement causing all eyes to turn toward him. Admiral Krell, may I show you something? Without waiting for a response, he gestured slightly. The chamber darkened, and the space between them filled with a three-dimensional star map of the galaxy. This is our galaxy as you know it, Kiahi explained. The map zoomed outward, revealing neighboring galaxies, then continued pulling back, to show the local galactic cluster. And this is what's approaching. At the edge of the visualization, something wrong appeared. Not a fleet or a celestial body, but a distortion. A spreading darkness that seemed to consume the very light around it, leaving behind empty void where once stars had shone. We call them the nullifiers, Kiahi said quietly. They exist partially, outside conventional reality. They've consumed 17 galaxies in the parallel continuum where we've been. They're drawn to spaces with high concentrations of advanced consciousness, particularly civilizations at war. Admiral Krell's composure slipped. What am I looking at? The end of everything unless we stand together, Kiahi replied simply. The Vraxian conflict with the Coalition is like a beacon to them, broadcasting vulnerability across dimensional barriers. Admiral Valoran leaned forward. How much time do we have? At current progression rates, they'll begin manifesting in this reality within 5 years. Full incursion within 20. Keahi manipulated the display again, showing spreading tendrils of darkness reaching toward their galaxy. They've already sent probes, subtle influences that have been shaping both Coalition and Vraxian policy for decades, pushing toward conflict. Chancellor Morvain's aged face showed deep concern. Can they be stopped? Yes, Keahi stated with certainty. The parallel humanity has fought them successfully for millennia, but it requires unified civilizations working in concert with technologies your scientists have yet to discover. Admiral Krell had gone very still. You're telling me that my people, that I myself, have been manipulated by these entities? Not directly, Keahi clarified. Subtle nudges in cultural development, small influences on key decisions. The Vraxian natural tendency toward expansion was merely encouraged in harmful directions. Krell's head lowered slightly. For a Vraxian, a species that prided itself on strength and independence, the implication was devastating. What would you have us do? He finally asked, all previous aggression gone from his voice. Peace, Keahi replied. Genuine peace, not merely cessation of hostilities. Then preparation. The Prometheus carries templates for technologies that will help both. Your civilizations advance to a state where you can perceive and counter the nullifier threat. Commander Leora Voss, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. What would this technology look like? Captain Keahi smiled faintly. The first stage involves modifications to your existing ships, adaptations that will allow them to detect dimensional inconsistencies. The second stage is developing countermeasures that can expel nullifier influence from affected regions. The third, he paused. The third stage requires a more profound transformation of both your species. Transformation? Ambassador Zari questioned, alarmed. Not biological, Keahi assured them. Perceptual. Your civilizations must learn to perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously. The human crew of the Prometheus underwent this change during our time in the parallel continuum. It's why we appear different to you now. For the first time, the delegates truly studied Captain Keahi and the other human crew members present. There was something subtly altered about their movements, as if they were constantly adjusting to stimuli no one else could perceive. Admiral Krell rose abruptly. I must consult with the Dominion Council. This changes everything. Of course, Chancellor Morvain agreed. We too must consider these revelations carefully. As the meeting adjourned, Leora found herself walking alongside Captain Keahi through the strange corridors of the Prometheus. You've been quiet, Commander, he observed. I'm trying to process it all, she admitted. Yesterday I was prepared to die covering a civilian evacuation. Today we're discussing threats from beyond reality. And peace with the Vraxians, it's overwhelming. Keahi nodded sympathetically. I understand. When the Prometheus first crossed over, I spent months in shock. My crew thought I'd gone mad. Your crew, Leora said, glancing around. There were 38 people aboard the Prometheus when it disappeared. But I've seen hundreds moving through this ship. Some are descendants of the original crew, Keahi explained. Some joined us from the parallel humanity. Time works differently there. I'm over 300 years old by your counting, though the transition between realities created certain preservative effects. Leora stopped walking, studying his face intently. You really are the same Rowan. Keahi, from the history texts, the one who pioneered the Keahi-Mendoza FTL theory. He smiled. That theory turned out to be only partially correct. Reality is far more complex and far more magnificent than we ever imagined. And now you've returned to save us all, Leora said, a hint of skepticism in her voice. Not to save, Kiahi corrected gently. To prepare. Humanity, all the sentient species of this galaxy, must save themselves. We merely bring the warning and the tools. As they resumed walking, the corridor opened into a vast chamber unlike anything Leora had ever seen. It appeared to be a garden, but the plants pulsed with inner light, and some seemed to exist partially out of phase with reality, becoming transparent at certain angles. This is beautiful, she whispered. This is just the beginning, Kiahi replied, of what's possible when we learn to see beyond our dimensional limitations. 6 months passed like a fever dream. The Helios Accords, named for the system where the Prometheus Ascendant had first appeared, had been ratified by both the Coalition and, more surprisingly, the Vraxian Dominion. The historic peace treaty had sent shockwaves throughout known space. Species that had been at war for generations suddenly found themselves reluctant allies against a threat most could barely comprehend. Leora Voss, now promoted to captain, led one of the first joint Coalition Vraxian missions aboard her new command, the Boundless Horizon, a vessel incorporating the first wave of technology from the Prometheus. The ship's hull contained trace elements of the same strange material that composed Kiahi's vessel, allowing it to detect dimensional disturbances. Her executive officer, to everyone's astonishment, was Subcommander Dravex, formerly of Admiral Krell's staff. Dimensional sensors are detecting another anomaly, Dravex reported, his lipless mouth forming the words carefully. Coordinates match the projections from Captain Kiahi. On screen, Leora ordered. The main view screen showed what appeared to be empty space, until specialized filters engaged. Then they could see it, a subtle distortion, like a heat mirage, roughly spherical and approximately 50 kilometers in diameter. That's the third nullifier probe we've found this month, noted Science Officer Vazaro, a lanky Procyon with silvery fur. They're becoming more frequent. Leora nodded grimly. Which matches Kiahi's timeline. Begin containment procedures. The Boundless Horizon moved into position around the distortion. From specialized emitters, a web of energy, based on principles even Vazaro didn't fully understand, began to envelop the anomaly. Where the energy touched the distortion, reality seemed to stabilize, the wavering effect diminishing. Containment at 60%, Dravex announced. Dimensional integrity stabilizing. Leora watched the process with a mixture of fascination and dread. Each probe they neutralized was one less foothold for the nullifiers, but the increasing frequency suggested the main incursion was accelerating. Captain, her communications officer called out, incoming transmission from the Prometheus. Captain Kiahi's face appeared on a secondary screen. In the months since the peace treaty, subtle changes had become more apparent in his features. Sometimes his eyes seemed to focus on points that weren't there, and occasionally his movements blurred slightly, as if he briefly existed in multiple positions simultaneously. Captain Voss, he greeted her, your containment operation appears to be proceeding well. So far, Leora agreed. But they're coming faster now. We're detecting new probes daily. Kiahi nodded, his expression serious. The Coalition Council has agreed to proceed with Stage 2 implementation. We'd like the Boundless Horizon to return to Earth immediately. Leora frowned. Stage 2 already? I thought we had more time. Recent calculations suggest the incursion timeline has accelerated. We need to begin upgrading the first wave of defensive vessels immediately. He paused. Your crew has shown remarkable adaptability with the initial technologies. You're our best candidates for what comes next. After completing the containment operation, the Boundless Horizon set course for Earth. Upon arrival 2 weeks later, Leora was shocked by the transformation of Earth's orbital space. Massive construction platforms surrounded the planet, building vessels unlike any she'd seen before. hybrid designs incorporating both familiar coalition architecture and elements clearly influenced by the Prometheus. At the center of this activity floated the Prometheus Ascendant itself, now surrounded by 6 smaller vessels of similar design that hadn't been there when Leora left. More ships from the parallel continuum had arrived. Aboard the primary orbital station, Leora found Admiral Valoran in conference with Captain Kiahi and another figure she didn't recognize, a woman with striking violet eyes and silver-white hair despite her youthful appearance. "Captain Voss," Admiral Valoran greeted her. "Allow me to introduce Admiral Kaida Arashi of the Transcended Fleet." Leora tried to hide her surprise. "Another vessel from the parallel continuum?" "The Eternal Vigilance," Admiral Arashi confirmed, her voice carrying strange harmonics that seemed to echo slightly. "The second of 7 ships that will transition to this reality." "7 ships?" Leora questioned. "Against a threat that consumed 17 galaxies?" "Quality over quantity," Kiahi explained. "Each vessel represents technological advancement beyond what conventional physics in this dimension considers possible. And they bring something even more valuable, knowledge." Admiral Valoran gestured to the holographic display between them, showing a 3-dimensional schematic of the boundless horizon. "Your vessel is going to receive significant upgrades, Captain, but more importantly, you and your senior staff will undergo the first phase of perceptual enhancement." Leora tensed. "The process you mentioned during the peace negotiations? I thought that was years away." "We're accelerating the timeline," Admiral Arashi stated. "The nullifier incursion has reached a critical threshold. We've detected dimensional thinning throughout this sector." "What exactly does this enhancement entail?" Leora asked cautiously. Kiahi and Arashi exchanged glances before Kiahi answered. "A nanite infusion that modifies specific neural pathways, allowing perception of dimensional variances normally invisible to your species. It's completely reversible and has been safely used for centuries in our continuum." "And it's voluntary," Admiral Valoran added firmly, "but essential for direct combat against nullifier entities." Leora studied the 3 faces before her. "And you've undergone this procedure, Admiral." Valoran nodded. 3 weeks ago. It's difficult to describe the experience, Leora. Like living your entire life partially blind and suddenly gaining that missing vision. "Your crew is being briefed as we speak," Admiral Arashi said. "We need your decision within 48 hours." 2 days later, Leora lay on a medical bed aboard the Prometheus Ascendant, watching as a member of Kiahi's medical team prepared a silver-blue fluid in a specialized injector. "The process takes approximately 6 hours," the technician explained. "You'll experience disorientation initially, possibly hallucinations, as your brain begins processing stimulus previously filtered out by your perceptual systems." Beside her, Dravex was receiving similar instructions. The Vraxian had volunteered immediately, driven, Leora suspected, by a desire to atone for his species' unwitting role as harbingers. As the cool fluid entered her bloodstream, Leora's last coherent thought was a question that had haunted her since the Prometheus first appeared. What would humanity become once this transformation truly began? The answer, when it came hours later as her perception expanded beyond 3-dimensional space for the first time, was both terrifying and beautiful beyond imagining. 3 years after the appearance of the Prometheus Ascendant, the first major battle against the nullifiers took place in the void between the Arcturus and Vega systems. The nullifiers had finally manifested fully, massive entities that appeared as geometric impossibilities, constantly shifting between forms that strained the sanity of any observer not enhanced with the perceptual modifications developed by the transcended humans. Where they passed, reality itself thinned, stars dimming as their fundamental particles were drawn across dimensional barriers. The United Defense Fleet, comprising vessels from both the former Coalition and Vraxian Dominion, formed a perimeter around the incursion point. At their center floated 7 ships from the parallel continuum, including the Prometheus Ascendant and Admiral Arashi's Eternal Vigilance. Fleet Admiral Leora Voss stood on the bridge of the boundless horizon, now significantly upgraded with technology beyond anything she could have imagined 3 years prior. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the dimensional fractures spreading outward from the nullifier entities, cracks in reality that would, if left unchecked, widen, until entire star systems slipped through into the hungry void between dimensions. "All vessels report ready, Admiral," announced her executive officer Dravex, who had remained by her side throughout the transformation of both their civilizations. "The transcended fleet has moved into primary position," added Tactical Officer Malachi, who had followed Leora from her old command. Leora activated the fleet-wide communications channel. "This is Admiral Voss to all ships. You have your assigned coordinates. Remember your training and trust your enhanced perceptions. These entities cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. They must be pushed back across the dimensional barrier and then sealed away." The fleet moved with unprecedented coordination, vessels from dozens of formerly warring species now functioning as a single organism. The ships equipped with first-generation dimensional technology formed the outer perimeter, their specialized emitters creating a containment field similar to what the boundless horizon had used against the early probes, but vastly more powerful. The second line, vessels with more advanced modifications, began generating what the transcended humans called reality anchors, stabilization points that prevented further dimensional thinning. At the center, the EI-7 transcended vessels initiated the most critical and dangerous phase, dimensional reversion. From the Prometheus Ascendant, Captain Kiahi's voice came through clearly. "Beginning inversion sequence. All enhanced personnel, activate your perceptual filters to level 3. Leora adjusted her perception, shifting her awareness partially into the adjacent dimension where the nullifier's true forms became visible. What she saw chilled her despite years of preparation, vast, multi-dimensional intelligences that perceived the universe as nothing more than sustenance. The nullifiers reacted to the containment efforts with violent resistance. Reality shuddered as they lashed out, dimensional shockwaves rippling outward. 3 defense vessels imploded instantly, their matter scattered across multiple planes of existence. "Containment failing in sectors 7 through 12. Dravex reported urgently. "Redirect auxiliary vessels to reinforce those sectors," Leora ordered calmly, "and prepare the dimensional charges." The battle raged across both conventional space and the dimensional boundaries beyond. To unmodified observers, it would have appeared as flashes of impossible light, sections of space folding and unfolding in defiance of physics, and vessels seemingly blinking in and out of existence. To Leora and the other enhanced personnel, it was a desperate struggle against entities of almost unimaginable power. Hour after brutal hour, the unified fleet held their line. Casualties mounted, over 30 vessels lost completely, hundreds more damaged beyond repair. But slowly, incrementally, the containment field strengthened, the reality anchors stabilized, and the dimensional inversion initiated by the transcended, ships began pushing the nullifiers back toward their point of origin. "Final phase," Admiral Arashi announced across all channels. "Prepare dimensional seal charges." This was the moment everything had built toward. Developed using principles that had taken the parallel humanity centuries to perfect, the dimensional seal charges would create a permanent barrier between realities, preventing further incursions in this sector for at least several centuries. "Charges armed and ready," Leora confirmed. From 7 points surrounding the incursion, the transcended vessels unleashed energies that defied conventional understanding. The charges detonated not with explosive force, but with reality-altering waves that rippled outward, restructuring the fundamental fabric of space-time. The nullifiers, sensing defeat, made one final, desperate assault, A massive dimensional shear cut through the fleet's formation. The Eternal Vigilance took a direct hit, its impossible hull finally buckling under forces even it couldn't withstand. Admiral Arashi's ship is critically damaged, Malachi reported. On her specialized display, Leora could see the Vigilance beginning to fragment across multiple dimensional planes. Without thinking, she gave the order. "Move us into position. We'll complete their portion of the sealing sequence." "Admiral," Dravex objected, "our systems aren't rated for that level of dimensional manipulation." "They'll hold," Leora stated, with absolute certainty. "Helm, maximum approach. Engineering, redirect all power to the dimensional stabilizers." The boundless horizon surged forward into the maelstrom. Alarms blared as systems throughout the ship began overloading. The hull itself vibrated at frequencies that made the very molecules of the vessel hum with strain. "In position," the helm officer announced, voice tight with tension. "Initiating seal sequence," Leora said, her enhanced mind interfacing directly with the ship's dimensional systems. "All hands brace for dimensional shear." Around the boundless horizon, reality itself seemed to fold and unfold like cosmic origami. The ship's enhanced hull glowed with energies never meant to be channeled through technology of their making. Through her enhanced perception, Leora could see the dimensional seal forming, a lattice of impossibly complex energy patterns that would sever this pocket of reality from the nullifier's domain. "Hull integrity at 30% and falling," Dravex reported, his normally stoic voice edged with concern. "Dimensional stabilizers overloading." "Maintain position," Leora ordered. "We need 90 more seconds to complete the seal." On the dumped-up main view screen, the Prometheus Ascendant adjusted its position, moving to support the straining, boundless horizon. Captain Kiahi's voice came through, distorted by dimensional interference. "Admiral Voss, we're extending our stabilization field to encompass your vessel. It may buy you the time you need, but the feedback could destroy both ships." "Acknowledged, Captain." Leora's eyes met Dravex's across the bridge. Both understood what wasn't being said, the potential sacrifice required. The nullifiers, sensing. The impending seal concentrated their assault on the weakened section of the defensive perimeter. The space around the boundless horizon warped violently as multiple dimensional attacks converged. 15 seconds to seal completion," Malachi announced, his voice tight with tension. The ship shuddered as another dimensional shear sliced through their defensive field. Emergency systems failed in cascades across all decks. On the bridge, gravity fluctuated wildly as reality itself became unstable around them. 10 seconds. Through her enhanced perception, Leora witnessed something extraordinary. The crews of over 400 vessels, representing species that had been mortal enemies just years before, working in perfect unity. Human, Vraxian, Centaurian, Arcturian, and dozens more, all their minds momentarily linked through the dimensional technologies, all focused on one singular purpose: survival. "Seal complete," Malachi shouted triumphantly. A shockwave of restructured reality rippled outward from the seal points. Where the nullifiers had torn through the fabric between dimensions, new barriers formed, stronger, more resilient than the natural boundaries they replaced. The nullifier entities caught on this side of the seal writhed in what might have been agony, their geometrically impossible forms collapsing as they lost connection to their home dimension. Within moments, they dissolved into dispersing energy patterns, harmless without their multi-dimensional anchors. Silence fell across the bridge of the boundless horizon as status displays gradually stabilized. Outside, the impossible geometries of battle faded, leaving only the stars, unchanged and eternal. "Damage report," Leora requested, her voice hoarse. "Critical systems failing on multiple decks," Dravex reported. "Dimensional drive offline. Conventional engines at minimal capacity." He paused, checking another display. But we're alive, Admiral. Somehow, we're alive. Across the fleet, similar reports filtered in. The casualties had been severe. Nearly a quarter of the combined fleet lost or critically damaged. Yet, compared to what might have been the consumption of entire star systems, billions of lives, it was a price worth paying. Captain Kiahi's image appeared on the main view screen, his features showing signs of strain, but his eyes bright with triumph. The Yao. Seal is holding, Admiral. Initial readings suggest it will maintain stability for at least 3 centuries before requiring reinforcement. And the nullifiers? Leora asked. Repelled for now, though this was merely their first major incursion point. Our sensors detect similar dimensional thinning in 12 other sectors of the galaxy. Leora nodded grimly. This victory, hard-won as it was, represented only the beginning of a much longer conflict. She opened a channel to the entire unified fleet. This is Admiral Voss. The immediate threat has been neutralized. All vessels begin recovery operations for damaged ships and prepare for eventual redeployment. As the adrenaline of battle subsided, a deeper realization settled over the bridge crew. They had faced an enemy that, just years ago, they couldn't have even perceived, let alone fought. They had wielded technologies that their ancestors would have considered impossible magic, and they had done so alongside former enemies, now transformed into essential allies. In the hours that followed, as the fleet regrouped and began the long process of recovery, Admiral Valoran contacted Leora from Coalition Command. The defensive network held, the older woman said, her expression a mixture of relief and pride. Because of what you did out there, we have time to prepare for the next incursion. The eternal vigilance? Leora inquired. Valoran's expression sobered. Lost with most hands. Admiral Arashi and 17 crew members were rescued before the final collapse. Leora nodded solemnly. And Captain Kiahi, the Prometheus? Damaged, but functional. They're already coordinating with our scientists to implement the next phase of defensive technologies. Valoran paused, studying Leora through the screen. You look different, Admiral. Leora hadn't seen her own reflection since the battle. Different how? Your eyes, Valoran said softly. They've changed. Similar to what we've observed in the transcended humans who've been enhanced the longest. Later, alone in her quarters, Leora examined her reflection. Valoran was right. Her copper eyes now held flecks of silver that seemed to shift and move independently, as if seeing into spaces beyond conventional reality. The changes weren't just perceptual anymore, they were becoming physical. A chime announced a visitor. Enter, she called. Captain Kiahi stepped into her quarters, his own appearance notably altered since the battle. The silver patterns in his hair had spread, and his movements had the strange fluidity she'd first noticed upon meeting him. I thought you might have questions, he said without preamble. What's happening to us? Leora asked directly. To those of us who've been enhanced. Kiahi sat down across from her. Evolution, Admiral. Accelerated by necessity, but evolution nonetheless. He gestured to his own altered appearance. The human body, indeed the bodies of all species who undergo enhancement, gradually adapts to process the expanded perceptions. Physical changes follow. Into what? She pressed. Into something new, he answered simply. Neither purely of this continuum nor of the parallel one. A bridge between realities. He leaned forward. This was always the true purpose of the Prometheus mission, Leora. Not just to bring back technology, but to begin the transformation that would allow humanity and all sentient life in this galaxy to survive what's coming. The nullifiers. Aren't the end of it, are they? She asked, though she already knew the answer. They're merely the vanguard, Kiahi confirmed. The parallel humanity has fought entities far more dangerous for millennia. This galaxy needs defenders who can perceive and combat threats across multiple dimensions of reality. And we're becoming those defenders, Leora concluded. Yes, by choice and by necessity. He rose to leave. Rest, Admiral. Tomorrow we begin planning for the next battle. After he departed, Leora moved to the viewport in her quarters. The stars looked different to her enhanced vision now, each one surrounded by layers of dimensional energy, connections threading between them that no unmodified human could perceive. She thought of how far they had come, from the desperate last stand at Helios Prime to today's victory against an enemy that most of the galaxy couldn't even comprehend 3 years ago. She thought of the Vraxians, once their mortal enemies, now fighting alongside humans with absolute commitment. She thought of Captain Kiahi and his crew, returning from an impossible journey to guide them through this transformation. The legendary human warship had indeed appeared when they were outnumbered and defeated, but what it brought wasn't just salvation. It was evolution. A new path forward for all sentient species who chose to walk it together. As her ship journeyed back toward Earth for repairs, Leora knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Humanity and its allies had taken their first steps toward becoming something new, something that could stand against the darkness between dimensions. And somewhere out in the void, other nullifier incursions were forming. Other battles waited to be fought. The war had only just begun. But for the first time since the Prometheus Ascendant had appeared at Helios Prime, Leora felt something beyond hope or determination. She felt certainty. They would win this war, not because of superior technology or enhanced perception, but because they had finally learned to stand together. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its ships or its weapons. It had always been its capacity to evolve.